Pleasant good afternoon to you. Chat with the Jackson family. We just want to come on for a little to talk to you about verbal abuse in the relationship. And we are not doing this topic because we are dealing with verbal abuse in our relationship, but we know that it is an issue in the world today, especially dealing with this pandemic thing. And we are home most of the time, and possibly because we are not working, then sometimes we are edgy and we get on the edge for just about anything and say things out of the norm to our partner, which does not make it right. So we as Chat with the Jackson wanna our aim is to keep family together, and in whatever way we can. Sometimes we use our own life to put it out there. We decide to be in the open so we could help at least one family, and if we do help one family, then that's good enough. And we also want you to know that we feed from you. So as we come to you every Tuesday night talking about family, then we learn stuff from you. Actually, because of the program, it makes me a better person. So it's not just that we are giving, but we are also receiving. So for a couple minutes, we want to talk to you about verbal abuse. On a Tuesday night at 8 p.m., Chat will be Jackson will be on, and we will be looking at abuse from the physical side. So today we just want to talk to you for a little while about verbal abuse. I'll now have my wife make her introduction, and then we will get into it for a couple of minutes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. As my husband stated before, we decided to speak on the topic of abuse, particularly verbal abuse as well as physical abuse. Last week, we spoke about verbal abuse as it pertains to our relationships. And yes, as he stated before, um, we're dealing much more with abuse now that we're confined to home. So it's more prevalent than before. Therefore, we have to find ways and means as how to address this issue and solutions as well. So we're just gonna speak briefly on verbal abuse as it pertains to relationships, in particularly couples. Um, Verbal abuse in itself is a definition would be when a person demeans one, puts you down, belittles you, right? So that lowers your self esteem. So we want to try to find ways and means as how to speak in a tone that's not abusive. As we know, verbal abuse, or if we don't know, verbal abuse is repeated. It's not just a one time thing, it's constant. You put the person down by calling them names, you put the person down by letting them know that they're nothing. And these are the things that takes a toll on one, which in fact will cause a person to go into depression. So we need to be mindful of how we speak, the tone that we use, and the things that we say that will cause one to be less demeaning, one to be feeling that they're not worthy, that they're not someone. So yes, as I stated before, we're in a time now where it's so touchy as with this pandemic, it has caused so much friction in families, so much breakup of families, because we're in a space where we're not normally in terms of dialogue with each other. We're used to getting up in the morning, going to school, going to work, coming home, doing the regular household chores versus having a conversation with our friends and family, more so our family. So now we're all in a space where we have no choice. Sometimes it becomes problematic because we don't know how to speak, right? And verbal abuse tend to escalate in this type of environment now so more than ever. So as we recap from last week and as we talk about verbal abuse, I hope this would be beneficial to someone, um, as it is to us, right? So we created this platform to bring about topics that we know all of us are dealing with on some level. So stay tuned as we give you some highlights as to verbal abuse as it pertains to the family and what are some of the solutions.
Thank you very much, my better half.
Welcome.
When it pertains to verbal abuse, from the outset, you know that there's something wrong. You know how you was brought up. You know how your parents used to talk to each other. Now, the way that your spouse is talking to you, it's complete different from how you was raised. You maybe yes, maybe no. Haven't seen it in your household that you was brought up in. Maybe you have, but if not, then it's not something hard for you to detect when someone is verbally abusing you. Now, when someone is verbally abusing you, you know what's going on, but sometimes it's hard for you to put your finger on it. You just know what he said, just don't sound right. You know what he do, just don't look right. But sometimes we even want to cover it up and say, no, that's not what he say. But you better believe that's what he say. And don't let it slip. And there are times that we start to blame ourselves. Okay, he said that because I didn't do that. He said it like that because I said that. And we start to blame ourselves. But let's not get into the blame game. Let's hold the bull by the horn. The first time he said something out of line that don't sound right, just don't let it go and wait for the second or the third or the fourth time. You address it immediately. And most of the time, your partner will tell you, well, that's not really what I say. That's not what I meant. But the beauty about it is whatever he say in whatever way or whatever it intend to be, you address it. So right off the bat, you know that you don't play these games with these verbal abuse. There are times that your partner would want you to think that you are crazy. You said, honey, you said something to me this morning on the way out, and we want to address it. And when you start to address it because you know what he said, then he might think that you are crazy to be thinking like that. Could be that he wants you to think that you're just too sensitive. But there are times that you say things and you definitely know that's verbal abuse. But he thinks that it's okay, or she thinks that it's okay. So he just wants you to think that, you know why you think like that? Because you are too sensitive. There are times that he might even tell you, lighten up. But all of this, we have to take it and under control. We can't just let these things slip by because they might come with that. Okay, you're just too sensitive, or you need to lighten up, or so forth. The first time you see this happening, you need to address it. And I will now hear what my wife, if she agrees with me, or you should let it go for a while. And how would you deal with it, honey, the first time you hear it from your partner?
So the first time something is said that would be considered abusive, sometimes it comes in such a way that it's shocking, and you then say to yourself, well, did my spouse just say this to me? Um, Sometimes you may overlook it, which in fact should not be the case. You may say, okay, this has never happened before, and now this has been said to me. Um, should I address it, or should I just let it slide? Sometimes we do let it slide, and with the notion in our head that, okay, I'm pretty sure this is not going to happen again. But unfortunately, most times it does happen again. And then for the second time, you may also let it slide, but you're cautious. You're aware now that this is beginning to seem like it's going to be a pattern. But instead of waiting for the third time to happen, we as women should have addressed it the first time, therefore not allowing a second time to happen. But we tend to be cautious and say to ourselves, well, he never said that to me before. So maybe, he was angry, or whatever the situation was at the time, why he said it. But we tend to, most of the time, we tend to not say anything the first time it happened. But in fact, we should speak up the first time that it happened. So therefore, you nip it in the bud right away, so it doesn't escalate further down the road into a second and a third time.
Okay, that's well said. That's exactly the way that I would look at it also. Now, when it comes on to verbal abuse, there are times that we will say that, well, it could be the abuser, and they will tell you that, well, people on the outside might see me as a nice person, but most of the time, verbal abuse is something that might happen behind the scene. So we also have to pay attention, because I'm the one dealing with it. And we have a saying while I was growing up, maybe we still have that saying, that sticks and stones cannot break my bones, but sticks and stones will break my bones, but words cannot harm me. Which, growing up, we always say that. But thinking about it now, I realize that that was a bad, bad, bad statement, or even something bad for us even to think about, because words do break us, and words are powerful. So we have to be very careful when we come onto verbal abuse. Verbal abuse is, as we said, it's behind the scene, and what your partner is trying to do, they're trying to control you. So you have to be very careful. Then they might even put the Bible in it and put a spin. I guess everybody using the Bible, even the OB man use the Bible, and they'll put a spin in it and tell you, well, the Bible say that I am the head of the house, and I should be in charge and so forth. Well, that is true, but we have to balance it. The Bible say that, but does that mean what you're saying? It does not. So we have to be very careful how we bring the Bible into it, and how we interpret, not how we bring it into it, but how we interpret the Bible. So the question I have for you, honey, is, when it comes on to control. How do you see it? Do you agree with it? Do you think that he's trying to control your mind? He's trying to just control you with verbal abuse and let you get comfortable and say it's the norm? What do you think?
Okay, so when it comes to control in the context of verbal abuse, I would say yes. Because if you are that spouse that's not very vocal and you have a spouse that's constantly undermining you, degrading you, putting you down, yes, that's in fact control, because that spouse realizes that he has the upper hand, right? And you are the weaker person because you're not going to retaliate. But that should not be so, because in a relationship, there should not be any control. It should be an equal balance. If I have something to say, I should be able to say it freely, and vice versa. If the husband has something to say about a particular topic or an incident or an issue, it should be verbalized freely and then come to a solution. We both should come to um, an agreement as to how we're going to solve this issue. But we should not be in an environment or in a relationship where we feel controlled, right? And an abuser, the person that's doing the abusing, verbally abusing, realizes that because the one that's on the receiving end is not going to retaliate, they will continuously do that. And then that brings about where the person feels less of themselves, because they're going to say to themselves, well, everything that I do, everything I say, it's always a problem. And as my husband stated before, regarding the statement, sticks and stones may break my bone, but words cannot harm me, I do agree that words will harm you. Words break you. There are times when things have been said to a person from childhood and it lingers into adulthood, and we see how a person behaves, and you may question, why does that person behave that way? Well, sometimes it's because of things that was said at a younger age that lingers on. For example, you'll amount to no good. That in itself is a very detrimental statement. And that lingers because that person, as they grow up, would always feel they're not good enough because of what was said. So we have to be mindful, extremely mindful of the things that we say, because it does linger on into adulthood that will cause so much harm to that person emotionally, physically, mentally, in terms of not just themselves, but how they interact with people that they come across, whether it's in their job, whether it's family, whether it's friends, it has an adverse reaction. So we definitely have to be mindful of how we say things to a person, how we say things to a child, because it does lingers.
Okay, thank you. And so, what I'm hearing from you, correct me if I'm hearing right, you're saying that verbal abuse is not normal.
No, it's not normal. Verbal abuse is repeated. It's not just done, okay, you say something to me today and then it's forgotten. It's a constant thing. Today you may say to me, "Oh, I don't like what you're wearing. You look so ugly." Tomorrow you may say something else demeaning, and the day after, and the day after. And these are the things that really cuts deep. We have to, like I said before, be mindful of what we say, because this has detrimental effects on one's psyche, on your emotional state.
Okay, so you were saying that basically we need to set some boundaries
Definitely.
when it comes to verbal abuse, and we need to set boundaries because if we don't and one of the things that I would encourage you to do while you're setting the boundary is seek help. Now there are times that we allow these things to get out of control before we want to even try and tackle it. Then it might be too late. We might seek help, and which will comes in more. Verbal abuse will lead to physical abuse if we don't catch it and deal with it early. So that's why we are coming back to you on Tuesday night at 8 p.m. We chat with the Jackson on Facebook Live. We'll be coming back to you and we'll be talking to you in depth about physical abuse. We want to thank you for spending this time with us, and continue to watch us, continue to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Chat with the Jacksons. We said until we talk again, we said peace out.